Homer's identity, however, is still a great mystery. Modern experts cannot agree whether he was one man, two, several, or even a woman. The ancients believed that he was one man, whose name mysteriously means the hostage. They thought he was blind, that he had lived just before 700 BC in Ionia, what is now the western coast of Turkey. Here, Greeks had migrated in the Dark Age which followed the collapse of Mycenaean civilization. It was a new world which would see the birth of Western science, medicine, and philosophy. If Homer existed, he worked as a professional singer, a bard, in royal and noble courts on these coasts. His was an oral society on the verge of literacy. The ancients assumed he had written his text. Modern scholars think that the Iliad was committed to writing in the century or so after his death, but that Homer himself was working in a fully oral tradition. But what does that mean?
Snáiche páide go bar na garán, Níorach sé cé tíide go tarint, Maid a rámú go ngógarisú, Bhí marú á chéadlas, Stúrú á réglas, Ganú go le nuachta, Cúri go le níochta, Woppadán agus Slapadán, Míalta mór agus Chónta, Is Woppadán le níor
Kilgalligan, on the Atlantic coast of County Mayo, Ireland. Here the oral tradition has lingered on. The last performer of epics the length of the Iliad died only 40 years ago, but there are still storytellers reciting tales of heroic deeds in heroic language. They resemble Homer in their style of speech, especially in the formulas or runs, whose repeat passages, like Homer's, are highly formalized. The storyteller we have come to hear cannot read or write and speaks only Gaelic. His name is John Henry.
For the
last 10 summers, John's repertoire has been recorded by Dr. Seán Ó of University College, Dublin. John has not yet run out of stories.
For the Dutch sheets in the stopper, Martin was attached. Hookshella Shataka Bari in the stopper. With scarces was a maskiftery. Wool Shambo her board. This in Shula vi Shayamu. Vi shat yak suas a shagivi rudder. With a rivini near shit yak suasless. Yagra Junagus Janual Latio. Wool Martin of Imla Crown. With such a cultivated Lemihosu. Ach, we find a community beige. We had a Hennigan screw Yariga sage of Hadoon. August. Love the pony, Carta 2 years door to pony. Tama Gary bought on long dying to Martin, who's good into long home. Near a Poculus of ale that we bought his gave. Stepal Martin or Stachary.
You couldn't just break it down for me in translation, could you, line by line? Is that a difficult thing for a storyteller to do?
It's very hard to do it, but and it's very hard to translate because there's a lot of the words don't mean anything in particular. It's alliterative. It's fully within the ancient tradition of runs.
But just to catch the flavour of it.
Well, Hoig said they got sholta bako jaha. They raised their sails. Bako jaha, bako jaha. Perhaps billowing or bellying sails or something like that. Snaich fada go bar na gran. Long threads or ropes to the tops of the masts. John. 200 rowing. 12 on the steering. Sand coming up and foam going down. Splish, splash, Loppadanagus, Lappadan. Whales and seals swimming along behind.
Mae'n chi bygan a ffarg I wir I gael yn ir. Gys y loi'r chos, gys yr wash y waid ar ôl.
In English, you might say the end result is that they set sail and they got there. But of course, it's much more complicated than that.
And what was it that impelled him to learn those stories?
Well, John's the man to answer that question. Think you wrote to Yerin Skelty show.
Bwyn ar dy roi mwyntin. Fi eisiau roi mwyntin I go bo alym sgil to gol. Ys topio hwn sa rei sgil to morffryn.
Fi to Santa Ha.
Fi ma Santa go bo alym yn siangod. Fi ma ga ddolym sy'n ma gofni I deg o ish.
Well, John says that this was the attitude of mind he always had. He was greedy for stories. And of course, he got them.
Now, no one in Kilgalligan is learning the tales from John to pass them on as he did. His only audience is the tape recorder, a sure sign that the tradition is nearing its end. Now we have no need of such guardians of the tradition. Today we recall our lists from a computer terminal, not from the memory of a bard. The idea of memorizing 200 names on an international flight would seem absurd to us. To deliver a poem the length of the Iliad is simply inconceivable. But it is still possible to see such a performance. To find it, we must travel far afield. This is the barren landscape of Turkish Armenia, within sight of the Soviet border, over 1,000 miles from Homer's wine-dark Aegean. To these lands, the Turks migrated from the Central Asian steppe in the 11th century AD, bringing their ancient traditions with them. In the town of Kars, they still survive. Like Homer, these men are professional bards. They sing and play at weddings, feasts, and funerals. They were brought up from childhood in the tuition of a master. This man, Sheriff Tashliova, was given away at 7 years because even then it was seen he had the bardic gift. He is now a master. His repertoire includes 100 tales from the Turkish medieval epic of Kurulu, many of them over an hour long. He's singing from Kurulu now. Here in Kars, the audience sat for 3 hours, as long as we might sit in a cinema, thrilled by the playing and by the pathos of the singing. Here it is still possible to feel the spell worked by a bard when he has an audience who believe in his magic. Rather distantly, Homer did something like this 2,500 years ago when he sang the tale of Troy. But what does such a performance tell us about the way Homer's text has come down to us?
In Homer's Odyssey, King Odysseus praises the bard Demodocus for his wonderful performance of the tale of Troy. You sing it, he says, as if you were there yourself, or as if you spoke to someone who was. And now we've been to Ireland and Turkey, we can gain some idea of how bards achieve that kind of effect. The sort of formulas, for example, that John Henry used in Mayo show the mechanism of memory and show how ancient elements can be preserved within the formulas and their rigid metrical patterns. And in Turkey, the great length of the Kurulu epic and its archaic medieval language shows how poems of this immense length can be memorized and orally transmitted by a single man, a professional. And it's interesting that both the audiences in Ireland and in Turkey view the tale teller as a professional, a specialised occupation. For Sheriff Tashliova in Kars, it's his job, quite simply. But we have to ask whether that tale actually goes back to the Bronze Age. And before we do, it's worth pointing out that there's nothing intrinsically unlikely in the idea that the Iliad could go back to an eyewitness account of a Bronze Age war. In Dark Age medieval Europe, for example, Viking kings took their professional bards, their skalds, with them on their campaigns in order to sing the old songs and to compose new ones about the deeds of kings. And these were only set down in writing many centuries later. Now, if that could happen in one heroic culture, it could have happened in Mycenaean Greece. But did it? Was there a Mycenaean bardic poem about Troy? And how were the stories transmitted over the 500 years before Homer?